This is a Culture Inject production. The Nevers Podcast presents In Conversation With.
Today, we're pleased to welcome Oscar shortlisted artist Johnny Han to the podcast. Johnny is a director and VFX supervisor whose credits include Pacific Rim, One Night in Miami, 2012, and the television series Heroes. He's currently serving as the VFX supervisor for HBO's The Nevers. Thank you for joining me today on the Nevers podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So just to kind of start off at ground level, what is the role of a VFX supervisor and how do you inhabit it?
The VFX supervisor works directly with all the key creatives, the director, the writers, the director of photography, and even interfaces with wardrobe and makeup and stunts, basically to help fulfill the vision, the collective vision, and using the tools that we have in our pockets to help bring that to life. So, if it's a situation where the director has a specific idea of, we want to see a rainy London street, but it's in a location we will never be able to go to, or a creature that doesn't exist. There's lots of ways in the cinematic toolkit. It could be a puppet. It could be a person in heavy makeup, in great special effects makeup. Or it could be visual effects. And visual effects refers to anything that we further manipulate after it's been filmed.
Well, so just out of curiosity, because I'm a total layman, what is the distinction between special effects and visual effects? So with visual effects, you're kind of working with computers and you're changing things digitally, right?
So the difference between special effects and visual effects is a special effect is something that happens live in camera and is pretty much what it is. So whether that's, a live fire that's actually burning, that someone is actually in front of and actually getting warm from it, or some sparks going off, or rocks collapsing, or glass shattering, anything that tangibly happens on set is a special effect. A visual effect is when we plan for that event to happen, like for a glass pane to break, but we may actually shoot it without glass so that in post-production, we digitally put in glass that breaks. So it's anything where it goes beyond what we do on set and have to further add to in the post process. So that could be, adding an explosion that was way too big to do for real, adding something so large or so not anything you can't actually do for real.
Right. So as someone in the domain of visual effects, are you kind of a minimalist where you're like, it feels better as much as we can do practically, I'm cool with that? Or do you feel like what you can do by digitally manipulating the visuals is just as good, if not better, than actually having an explosion?
Oh, we try our best. And we always try to do it for real. I mean, one, because it's so much more fun, right? Like, what better thing to do at work? You show up to work, like, what are we doing today? Oh, we're blowing up this building. Like, oh, that's cool. It's way more fun to actually blow up a building than to watch a green screen and say, oh, we have to do it later. It's sitting in front of a computer. But the reality is, especially with the kind of all the good writing these days, right? We're in such a golden age of writing. The ideas are just getting so big and so detailed and so interwoven with like characters and things that we kind of have to now rely on pushing things further than what can be shot for real. A lot of it is, audiences these days, not just good writing, but we're just so good, so used to good everything, right? Like amazing cinematography now with amazing cameras and amazing everything. We've pushed everything. And so the audiences are pretty familiar now with knowing when they're seeing something that was just done fake, like you can kind of tell now when rocks are made out of styrofoam or where glass isn't actually sharp, or when a character is actually far from the fire, but you try to frame the shot so the character feels like they're right in front of that flaming inferno, but you can kind of tell they're still 10 feet away from it. So, I'd say we still try it and we go for it to shoot it for real. But then we take a look at it when we're editing it and we say, if that fire felt a little closer to her, it would feel that much more dangerous, or her emotion would be that much more scared. And then we say, all right, on top of the real fire, let's digitally add more, or sometimes just replace those rocks that felt a little styrofoam, let's replace them and animate using real physics, some like 100-ton rocks that you can never shoot for real. So it always starts with shooting the most we can and just trying to sweeten it after.
That's interesting because it brings me to the question, how much collaboration is there between visual effects and special effects?
Oh my gosh, we are like tied at the hip. And the third component is probably stunts as well, because often with danger, there's an actor, right? Or a character. Every day, there's always some meeting where when we're preparing to shoot. So for instance, right now we're in prep for the next bunch of episodes. Every day, somewhere in the day, is us at a table, each with a cup of coffee probably, and going through the lines, and we'll say, all right, next line of the script says, such and such will encounter, something so big and dangerous. And we all raise our hands and say, the assistant director will say, all right, who's going to do this? And, on a good day, everybody raises their hand because everyone's got an idea, say, oh, we could do it this way. And we could build a machine that, and then I'll raise my hand. I'll say, oh, visual effects, we could also approach it this way and do digital. And stunts might say, oh, actually, we have a solution too. That's on a good day. On a bad day is when nobody raises their hand. And it's like, okay, no one really knows how to solve this one. And then, then we break it up and say, okay, well, maybe stunts can do one of the characters, but the other one has to be a stunt double. Okay, but if it's a stunt double, we're going to see the person's face. And then I'll say, well, visual effects can handle that part. We can digitally replace a face. And special effects might say, okay, and we'll make sure there's a bunch of rocks falling in the foreground so that we cover up as much of that face as possible. So it really relies on every department to put their best ideas forward.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I had no idea the interconnectedness of all these different departments and how they work together to create such a fantastic product. It does feel to me like this kind of work exists within the convergence of two very distinct aspects that are stereotypically, to a layman like myself, very opposite from one another. Like on one hand, there's this powerful mathematic, computerized, mechanistic world of data and programming and, a lot of critical analysis. Then on the other hand, you have artistry and storytelling and creativity in this fantastic world populated by Victorian superwomen. So I was wondering, how much is it for you a left brain, right brain synthesis between these two things in this work? Like, do you enjoy both of those aspects?
I gotta say, and I always say about visual effects, it is the ultimate crossover of technology and art. Um, not a day goes by that you don't go home utterly creatively exhausted. Every part of your brain, as you said, the part that has to dream up the image, and then the other half has to say, well, how am I going to create that image? And it's I'm such a nerd for technology, and every day I read all the gadget blogs, and they'll say, oh, this new camera can do such and such, and can now do this speed slow motion. And then I'll see a new 3D program, now had, like, back on the Smallville days, I worked on that show at the very beginning. That's when a lot of software was really just starting to come out. It was a golden age of 3D software. And every new release of a program would have some new feature. It's like, now we can simulate smoke, or now we can simulate hair, right? Like just basic hair strands kind of moving like hair. And then I would say, okay, next big superpower, we got to like incorporate that somehow. Not a hair monster, but we could say like, we got to, so one time we made like the cape. We had a few shots of capes in that show, not too many, but and said we can take a bunch of hair curves and sort of put them all together, and then it kind of is like a moving piece of cloth, and that fast forward, 20 years later now, we're still very much doing that. Anytime I see something new on the technology side of things, I will always think, all right, how can we use that? How can we use that to create an image that we've never seen before? That audiences haven't gotten used to seeing. And furthermore, you got to think, all right, what's the point? My point isn't just to wow people, right? But you, as an artist, and especially in filmmaking, you kind of grow and you mature to realize it's got to be about the emotions, right? Like, you want a cool image, but for what? It's to like make you feel something and change you somehow, whether it's to feel scared or excited or sad or angry. An image has to make you do that. So we're always looking for technology to help us create new visual ways of making you feel something new.
I love that idea of effect-driven storytelling. Like, you were on this cusp, on this frontier of technological innovation, and figuring out how to I guess get the hair, or like the cape to flutter and all that kind of stuff, and how that was informing the stories that we see in media. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of what we see today in, like, I guess, Marvel movies and Transformers and all these epic action blockbusters is what made it possible, and what made this kind of storytelling possible was technology and the advancement of all these techniques that folks like yourself are at the forefront of. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, and I'll just say one more thing, is that it's not filmmaking in general. Cinema has always been about that. The camera itself is a piece of technology. Even when it was a box with a strip of film moving through it, that is the equivalent of a supercomputer today. Back then it was, some very gadget thinking person, once we learned how to expose images, is like, how do we use images to now use it for art? So it goes from the cinematography side to, makeup and special makeup. I'm sure as new materials, we learn of different kind of pigments and different kind of synthetic rubbers and things. I'm sure I've never worked in that department, but I always feel like that's, we learn new ways to create new techniques. Wardrobe, I haven't worked in wardrobe either, but I do know that pattern making, and now a lot of we actually use simulation, cloth simulation, the same tools we use to do cloth in visual effects was also being used in costumes and wardrobe to simulate how would this look on someone, if the fabric were thinner or heavier, how would it drape on someone in general. So, technology and art is woven into every part of filmmaking. It may be a little bit more on the surface of visual effects because it's so bluntly like computers in the most like nerdy way possible. But anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, what was your path to getting to where you are today? How, in this career involved in these projects, did you take another path at first, or did you always know you wanted to be in VFX?
I was always like an artist, growing up. I was always a kid who was just drawing constantly. And then that kind of got mixed into like a lot of kids in the 90s, your first exposure in the 80s, actually, of first exposure to a video camera. My dad had one, and it was just about running around shooting video of my friends. Computers were just, becoming a thing. And then watching a lot of science fiction, right? I mean, boy, oh boy, that was the age of, every sci-fi genre, in the 80s and 90s it was so groundbreaking visually. You just never saw anything like it. And so I'd say I was always an artist, but fueled with all the sci-fi television and film I was inundated by probably helped shape me to say, that's what I want to do. I know I can draw, I know I can paint, and I know I can do these things, but I think I want to somehow apply that to what I love, which is watching TV, right? So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. As science fiction, I would imagine, is the visual effects playground. Like, that's the place you want to be if you're in that field. I don't imagine, you can't really do much in a rom-com.
Yeah, I mean, sci-fi definitely paved the way for this industry.
So when you were first on this kind of Campbellian journey to become a VFX artist, did you encounter a mentor figure, like a wise old man who gave you the sage advice and the protective amulets to go be successful and slay this crazy CGI dragon?
I would say I don't know if there's a single person. There was so I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York, which is an art school. And the dean of our department, John McIntosh, who had come from some of the great visual effects companies and from Kodak, and I was a freshman, and I went to his office basically because I said, I think I want to try to find a job. Like, I want to make a little cash. And it was one of those moments where, I was just a freshman, but I had done so much work on my own, not through school but just doing it on my own. He basically said, okay, we need to put you in a studio, even though you're not you're still in school, and usually the seniors are going out for internships, but he did a lot to recognize in me that, maybe I was doing something not all the other kids were doing, and basically helped me find beyond the confines of our school. But he found this animation studio in New York to basically take me in as that kind of bratty 18-year-old who thought they knew everything, but quickly realized you don't know anything when you enter the real working world. And so it became my second playground outside of school. And so basically the lesson learned there was just, someone believing in you. And I'm not saying that's easy to find, but the way you make luck happen is you put yourself out there, like if I didn't go into the office and say, hey, look at my stuff, that would never have happened. So, now with social media and every kind of outlet out there, it's about putting your work out there, not for vanity. And I think that's an important part of it is it's not for vanity because, vanity can be recognized very easily. We're very good as humans in sort of detecting another person's ego. And I think it's just important that when you put yourself out there, put your work out there, it's to really just do it for the love of it and not to show off. Nobody likes to show off.
At what point during the pre-production process of The Nevers did you join? Where did that story start? I
came on the show pretty early. I think I first read stuff in January, February of 2019 and met with Joss Whedon at about the same time. In fact, I read the material in preparation for my meeting. And I didn't know anything about it. It was super secret. And it was from some of the Game of Thrones production people that largely went over onto the Nevers. And so that was my only point of reference. I was like, okay, it might be kind of Game of Thrones like, but it kind of was and wasn't. I mean, it was period, but it was a Joss Whedon show, which was, my goodness, like what a treat, right? Great studio. They're going to put out good stuff, and they won't put anything. They'll take risks, but they won't put anything lazy out there. It's a good studio, and Joss Whedon, what a great combo with producers from Game of Thrones, to put it together. I joined then. It was very early days. All the characters were kind of just being formed, but we already knew some of our big action pieces that would be in season one. We knew, hey, somehow this secret electric car would have to transform out of a carriage in a chase sequence. And we were like, how is that going to work? Like, does a carriage, is it an escape pod where the carriage just disintegrates and the car comes out? Or does a carriage kind of literally transform like a transformer? And that was probably one of the first discussions. And some of the other characters like Nimble, who comes out in episode 3 or 4, and he can shoot out these metal discs where I think at one point they were square, but I think they would turn round. And they're called rounds in the script, so they became round. And, I remember pitching an idea of we're like, what should they be made out of? What material? And I said, what if they became the material of whatever nearby object there was? Like if it was near a brick wall, the disc would be kind of brick-like. And if he was near some iron, it would be iron. And if he was near glass or water, it would somehow be a clear disc. Kind of the idea that he's actually pulling the molecules from something nearby. We didn't end up doing that. Probably a little bit out of the cost of it. But I guess what I liked about those early meetings, and Joss was so receptive to, and Joss is just so such a creative, he's so willing to hear your ideas and riff on them. But one of the things I wanted to lay down for Joss for all the superpowers, I wanted to say, one of my biggest peeves in other superhero shows and movies is that it's so effortless for all the characters. It always feels like they've got this unlimited supply of, crazy energy, and it never seems to make them sweat. So because the show has themes of science and real intelligence, right? Penance is all about, she's an inventor. She's not making stuff out of witchcraft. She's actually using science to build stuff. Is I wanted to adhere to a little bit of rationale and some sort of pseudoscience And, the first rule is conservation of energy, right? All things burn energy to exert force, right? We burn calories to lift a heavy weight. And so I wanted to say, let's make sure these characters, like, it takes effort to use their powers, especially if they did something big. If Bonfire throws a really big fireball, let's make sure it feels like it's hard for her. It's like in a video game, right? You charge button, hold down button, let it charge, you let go, right? You got to earn the big energy blast. And so I was like, let's make sure that it feels like there's effort for the characters. And so with Nimble, again, in episode 105, where spoilers, he throws down a bunch of discs to create these steps for Su Ping to run down to run to Malady. If you watch closely, you can see with every disc he throws, we try to make it look like it's harder for him with each disc, because he has to throw it further and further away. And out of rapid succession, it's almost like he runs out of energy by the end, by the last one. And those little things where it doesn't seem like visual effects, but visual effects still ties into the story. And to make the visual effects believable, it depends on that performance and that acting of whether it means they feel tired or running out of juice.
Yeah, I can't tell you as a representative of the audience. I think I can speak for the audience when I say how much we appreciate that attention to detail, because so often like you said, in so many of these shows, there's not much of a physical or emotional cost to what's happening, and it feels a little bit outside of the laws of physics in a way that's not something you really have to suspend your disbelief. But like you were saying with Penance, the fact that she had those sleepless nights after those inventions, or it really took a toll on her physically. And I think it really adds to that world and to these characters in such a wonderful way. So I really appreciate that, just to throw a little token of appreciation at you over there.
I'm so glad you noticed that. And the Penance thing is a perfect example. And that's just in the writing, right? That's just good writing.
Yeah. So how large is your team on a production like this?
In the visual effects department, it's quite big. I'd say within the shoot, kind of like we've got like a dozen people directly kind of servicing the visual effects department, everything from production coordinators and managers and people who are taking care of the like everyday department to department logistics of like, oh, we need gloves, but they need to be painted green. We have a lot of that on our show where we have to paint stuff green to be green screen, all the way down to what we call visual effects data wranglers, who are these guys that are so on their feet all day, where they're taking measurements of everything we film when it's a visual effects shot, which on this show is nearly every shot. They measure like distance of the camera to the actor and actor to the wall, and triangulate all the, what that triangle is, so that when we shoot the green screen version of that on a different day, we can recreate that same camera setup. And so that's what data wranglers do. We even have a dedicated green screen team, which is three very strong men who are basically maintaining all the gigantic green screen and blue screens we have on any shoot day. And often it means these green screens are on giant cranes, basically, these giant cherry picker cranes and things that are holding up these 20 foot by 20 foot blue and green screens. Sometimes we have several of these. So yeah, I'd say about a dozen on set with us. And then And then for the visual effects work, the shot work, which are the artists actually executing, and doing the animation, 3D modeling and texturing and lighting. And I can't even give you a number. It's in the hundreds.
And those guys obviously are not on set, right? Those guys are working remotely?
Correct. So those guys work with the individual companies that we hire. So like the Macavision, Scanline, we had so many across every continent, I think. We had Megalith in Japan. We had Mr. X in Canada. Scanline is in LA, but they're kind of satellited all over the world. Lots of companies. And again, that adds up to hundreds of artists. And at one point, especially with all the different continents they're on, it meant that at some point, at every hour of the day, someone in the world was working on the Nevers.
It's a 24-hour job.
24 hours, yeah.
Was that part of your job to recruit all these different VFX companies, or how involved were you in that? Yeah,
so pretty much it lies between me and our visual effects producer, Jack Geist, who is pretty much the lateral person next to me that is kind of weighs in on everything. But the visual effects producer is kind of more or less in charge of the actual logistics and rationale of the budget and the schedule and making sure it all gets done. My half is a little bit more on the creative and technical side of like actually getting the work done. So we kind of talk and we decide who we feel, what artists are out there, what supervisors we worked with in the past, or what companies we've worked in the past. I used to work at Scanline on 2012 actually, and so they're good friends of mine. And so we call them up and say, hey, we have such and such work to do. They did the Galanthi ship coming out of the clouds in the pilot and all the spores that rained down. And they did the big water fight in 103. So good friends of mine. And but we talk to them and then we decide, all right, what can they do? We talk to other companies as well to see who's best suited to what. And, it's really about playing to everyone's strengths, right? Different artists are good at certain things. And that's, recruitment's all about that. But being a good, I guess, supervisor is having a good eye to know, really who has the better, I'm saying better, but who's more suited to what type of work, whether it's all our environments and set extensions. Was a company in Milan, EDI, did all of our set extensions on our show. And that is quite a feat because on a period show, it's really hard to come up with a world that only exists in black and white photos and old books. So some companies are better at environment. Some companies are better at water and effects. Some companies are better at the abstract. Mary's light that comes out of her in her song in the pilot and in episode 3. We use a very well-known company called Boof in Paris, which are famous for some of the very artistic and abstract visuals, all the way back from like Neo's Matrix vision and maybe they did the second one where it's featured more, to like Batman's remember his like echolocation vision in one of the Nolan films. So they did Mary's Light for us because we're like, it has to deal with like sound waves, and it had to have this essence of kind of things in nature. Again, sound waves, it's her song, it's her voice. How do we visualize something that's actually audio and still keep it beautiful? And, not to generalize, but I've worked with so many French companies, Parisian companies that are so, I think it's in the culture. They're just so like visually so on it when it comes to like coming up with cool and really tasteful kind of looking designs. And so Booth did that for us. They were great. So anyways, to answer, lots of different companies. And yes, I do kind of handpick each one.
Talking about all the different companies you worked with and just how geographically diverse all of this work is, I was curious about how COVID has impacted the VFX business, because I know that a lot of, obviously you were on set, but a lot of the people who are doing more of the digital work were working remotely. So there's no geographic obligation for them to be in LA or to be America based or anything like that, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And, pre-COVID, yeah, we were largely, I've never met a lot of the companies in person, up to that point, and still to this day. But, there was always the intention of, it's always good to visit the studios. And when you have time in prep, I usually try to make my rounds a bit to at least see the facilities and see, the size of the render farm and, things like that, and just putting a face to it. We don't have that luxury anymore. And, but, to be honest, visual effects was already gearing up for the age of remote work. There are whole studios, modern visual effects studios, some in London that from the ground up were remote, meaning they have no CPUs under their desk, and not as something they morphed into. Like the company were designed to only use cloud computing. Therefore, the artist could even log in from home because they didn't need the big computer under their desk. So we're kind of warmed up for that already as an industry. COVID accelerated that, but like all things, it's about communication, right? And if everyone can get on a Zoom and at the right time, giving time, the time zone issues, I'd say that probably was the hardest part of it, was how do you get Tokyo, London, LA to be on the same call. That was pretty tough, actually. But in terms of the work, I think we just bit our lip and pressed on, knowing that a lot of artists were working from home. Some would say that we got more efficiency out of it and artists were a lot happier. I think there's still some hurdles to jump. Working visual effects, you have to the quality of the image you're looking at on your monitor has to be super, not just high res, but the color fidelity, the monitor you have, right? In our industry, we have computer monitors that cost like, $20,000. I don't think everyone needs one, by the way. I don't personally think it's necessary, but it's a very gear heavy industry. And so, there are times when I got some shots I was reviewing and I'm like, oh, the color feels kind of off on this. I wonder if it's because some poor artist is in their bedroom with sunlight pouring into their room on their probably gaming monitor that they just had at home, not to their fault. And those are the kind of things that, that's just a matter of COVID caught us so off guard. I think in the future we'll be more prepared and we'll have better ways to do it. I will say this, shooting during COVID was very, very difficult. We were shooting 105 and 106, episode 5 and 6. After COVID shut us down, when the first time we came back with all the heavy restrictions, and I'm sure every other show has talked about this, but the funny thing is the one scene that we had deliberately held off on before we even knew about COVID, was, and again, spoilers, but Melody's hanging scene. Because we, at one point, we had like planned for like 500 extras or something. Don't quote me on that. It was a lot. But, that's pre-COVID, with still the intention of multiplying that even more to make the crowd look like thousands, right? So come COVID, we're like, okay, that's not going to happen. The whole story is about the people, right? That the whole theme of that episode is how does a collective body of London react to this? So we did every trick in the book to make our very meek crowd of sometimes only 20 to 50 extras, all wearing masks. And right before we yell action, they pull their masks off and put them in their pockets. We use every trick in the book to multiply those 50 to look like, maybe 500. We definitely didn't go as far as 1,000, but it was very challenging. And but boy, oh boy, so proud of the team because we got through it. And I think it's a great episode and a great scene. And I think, maybe now that people know, they might watch it and be like, oh, there are a lot of kind of clever camera angles that hide people, but it was challenging, but really, really happy with what everyone did. Everyone was so into it. Everyone after COVID, you could feel the kind of camaraderie to say, guys, we're so lucky to be filming. Let's just do our best to get it done.
That scene really comes off as, I think the effects that you were looking for as an audience member were certainly received for me because it did really feel like a pack of wolves salivating over this public event that was, I guess, morally outrageous, and the emotion was really felt. So I'll say, and another scene I think that you mentioned a little earlier, which was one of the standout scenes in this show for me at least, was the water fight between Amalia and Odium. So I was wondering how far in advance did you have to prep for that, and what were some shots that were done on a sound stage? Was it on location? And what were some of the challenges with that one?
Yeah. So luckily we knew about that very early while we were still prepping for the pilot, I think. Although it was actually not going to be Odium. It was going to be another character, but later adapted to Odium because it was a much cooler scene. But anyway, we got to plan that one really early. And the way I mentioned the sitting at the table with your coffee, we had one of those meetings with stunts and special effects. And we said, all right, we got this guy. He's got to walk in water and beat up Amalia. She's got to be underwater. He's got to be above water. And all the classic suggestions came out. We build a glass platform, just under the water surface. But a very kind of narrow one that he could walk on, but Amalia could freely be underwater right next to him. And then we thought, okay, well, we could do stuff also with wires. So it looks like he's kind of treadmilling over the water, like suspending him over the water. And then we thought, there are ways we could do on CG. We did have ideas of shooting it in the real lake. But then by the time we had our schedule for the shoot, it got pushed to February, and it's like the coldest time of the year here. And just for safety reasons, that we cannot do that. For all we know, it could have been frozen. So it became, as all good, successful sequences, a combination of all those things I just mentioned. We shot in a tank at Pinewood Studios, a very famous indoor tank where many of James Bond and many of films have shot in. And we said that was going to be the lake. We're going to put green screen all around it, and we are going to make an all digital environment of the lake. Very ambitious because it's nice to have a little bit of green screen, but when everything is green, your brain is not so easily fooled. So a lot of tricks to that to make it feel make it feel real. So we had a tank, and we prevised the whole sequence. And previs is when you kind of make an almost like low res gaming animatic of a whole sequence, where everything is just kind of super low poly version, like animated storyboards. And the reason we do this is not just to tell us what the shots are, but we had to kind of reverse engineer in 3D space how, with every image we want to see, how can you actually shoot that in a tank? Because you have to have like a crane, a camera at the end of a crane, and that crane has to be able to go above water and underwater. So a crane is a big arm, and there are only so many angles it can swing before it accidentally like knocks someone's head off, right? It's a huge, huge machine. So we pre-visit, we break it down, we say these shots are going to be the crane, these shots are going to be a scuba diver with a camera. Laura Donnelly, who plays Amalia, she was a trooper. And I know it's said on every other interview behind the scenes thing for the sequence, but she deserves it because she was put through hell in that sequence, and she never once blinked an eye, never once said, guys, let's stop. She was game for it. She knew it was arduous. And so every shot of it is Laura, except for just a handful of wire stunts, where it's Helen Bailey, her stunt trainer and double, who's doing the shots. But 95% of it is Laura. And I think that's what makes the sequence so real. Because it was her, the camera, we didn't have to dodge any angles. We didn't have to avoid seeing her face, as a lot of stunt action scenes go. We just went for it. And you're staring right at her as she's like running out of air. And it was so real. And honestly, the visual effects, as much as I'm super proud of it, are only as good as the performance. We can do CG water, we can do CG bubbles, we can do all of that. None of it means anything if you don't believe what that actress is doing. The surface of the water, we experimented with like trampolines, and we went to a trampoline park to kind of play with this idea of the surface not being rigid. He can still walk on it, but it should still kind of bounce and give. And we're like, what kind of surface is that? So we bounced around trampolines, and we got memory foam mattresses and lined them all up like a pathway, and tried everything. And I think it shows. I would say when you watch the sequence, it's subtle, but you can tell the surface he walks on has this nice kind of bendiness to it. And pretty proud of that.
The scene it does feel very real, and by virtue of, I guess, the performance as well as just the atmosphere you created, it has a frenetic energy to it that's really exciting and really scary. And it's incredible to me that you've just mentioned right now that wasn't shot on location. That was a completely green screen environment that you created. I was wondering, when she fell off the bridge, was that an actual bridge, or was that also a depth perception trick or something? Yeah.
So there are, I'd say, 2 shots that are shot on location. It's the very first shot and the very last shot, but it's not the shot you're talking about. The location shot is when you see the carriage kind of tilted over, and Odium reveals himself from behind the carriage and starts to walk towards the bank. That's real. And the shot, actually, when he first walks out onto the water, that one is real, but the water has been replaced, but he is actually walking on a platform. And the very last shot where she looks up at the horses is real, like at the location. Everything in between is stage, and including the shot where she falls out. We're kind of looking down towards the water, she falls away from camera. And so that is a carriage set piece built on a scaffold with this door, trap door, able to like release on command. So we're actually staring into the Pinewood swimming pool there. And it's pretty convincing. I mean, if you look closely, you can tell that it's not sunlight reflecting. That's usually the giveaway. But it's an amazing stunt. So your eyes are just like, oh my God. So that pretty much helps us not realize it's a tank.
I wanted to ask you about one more of the kind of sizable turns you got to visualize on the show, and that's Primrose. Can you talk about her initial appearance and the techniques you used to kind of create her character?
Yeah. So from the beginning, we knew about Primrose. It was very interesting, actually. At first, we were wondering, should it be like a very tall, lanky character that we scale up, just not a little bit, but, someone that lends themselves already to being tall. But then we kind of realized, that's not kind of what we're trying to tell. We want this girl to be a small, shy, kind of sheepish girl. And what's the worst thing that can happen to that shy girl is being twice as big. So that was something decided early on, that it won't be a tall, skinny actress. It'll be someone quite petite to kind of give it the most contrast, right? We did a bunch of tests in the beginning of like, is she the actress is about 5 feet. And we said, should she be 7 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet? So we did a few green screen tests, and we decided, doubling it by 2 to make her 10 feet is probably the easiest math wise, because there's so much math that would go into planning every shot. And we thought, 10 feet, that's good. Double the height. Nice, easy number. And so for everyone out there, she's supposed to be theoretically 10 feet. Of course, it's cheated. The reference, of course, coming from Joss was, oh, come on, the Hulk. We cheated him in every shot. Sometimes he was smaller, sometimes he was bigger. Like, any times I got really like uppity about like, oh, that's not the right size, he's like, don't worry. Like, the Hulk, no one ever blinked an eye. So, okay. And the way we filmed Anna was, again, bag of tricks. Everyone, in every meeting I go to, where we have a new kind of producer or someone, they always ask, so how do we shoot Primrose? And I say, there's not one single way. It's a big bag of tricks. And again, to filmmaking, there's not one solution. Depends. Is it a wide shot? Is it a close-up? Is she moving? Is she walking? In general, one thing we do is we shoot the scene kind of as is, so that all the other characters can so they can still speak to her for real. And so there's the interaction. And then we shoot Primrose, we shoot Anna on a green screen. But we should try to set up the green screen there. So we're still there right after we've shot everyone else. So we're still in the moment, that same, with all the other characters there. We're in the same set, same lighting, but we put up a green screen behind her. And then we take the cameras and we move the cameras in closer to her by half the distance and half the height. So if the camera is 10 feet away from her normally, with all the other actresses, let's say it's 10 feet away, but 4 feet off the ground. For the Primrose pass, we move the cameras in to be 5 feet away from her and 2 feet off the ground. So from the camera's point of view, she is optically twice as large. It's not the same thing as zooming the lens. By moving the camera physically closer, you have shrunken the world around the actress. So this is, quote unquote, the most like optically correct way to pull off the gag of having a giant. You're supposed to also shoot them in slow motion. That we kind of creatively decided not to do a lot of just to keep the character more natural, because at the end of the day, it's all about believing the character and the emotions, and especially her lines. And so we said, all right, we can't do her in slow motion because we still need to relate to her like a young girl. Does that work? And sometimes I do say, oh, it should be slow motion, but that gives it the right weight and size. But at the end of the day, I think it's a creative exception that keeps it real, keeps the character real, and you believe everything she says, because it's we haven't manipulated that, the speed of that.
Right. And then, so just to like clarify that, so when you shoot it as like naturally, do you digitally remove her from that scene in her natural size and then add in
sometimes if she's clear of anyone else, we'll just leave her there. But if we know there are people going to be crossing over, we will have Anna come out of the scene but read her lines from off camera, and sometimes put just a little green marker hanging from the ceiling to represent the top of 10 feet, or rather where her eyes should be, so that all the other actresses can look up at that little green piece of tape, or sometimes it's like a tennis ball. So sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
How cool was it to design the Galanthi?
The Galanthi was a very long and adventurous journey. What's funny is we prevised it early on. We had a previs that sequence, and we had no idea at that point what it was going to be. And we just used like 3 spheres put together, kind of like a giant ant, just as a placeholder in our previs, because it was that vague. Like, we really had no direction yet. So what ultimately, okay, so there's a Galanthi ship and the Galanthi creature. Which one are you referring to?
Either or, both.
Yeah. So the ship, honestly, and this is my favorite design process, is we have an artist, and I say, I'd rather have 50 pencil sketches. And by that, I mean literally like a pencil and a piece of paper in a 2 or 3 second, just draw a shape. Just give me a shape. And I say, I'd rather have 50 of those, by tomorrow, rather than 3 really beautiful painted colored images. Because, for something like a ship, it's got to be so recognizable by its silhouette, right? The way any great icon or, any great, especially a vehicle. I'm a big Star Trek fan, and I remember reading about the design of Deep Space Nine, the space station. And one thing I remember reading is the Enterprise has such a distinct, simple shape. It's a circle with two cylinders for an engine and sort of a middle cylinder. And it's so simple. It's 4 shapes, but that's what it is, right? So Deep Space Nine, I remember reading that they had all these designs, and the producer had basically said, a kid from the kitchen, an 8-year-old boy in the kitchen looking across the hall to the living room on his, old school TV, has to be able to recognize that space station from across the room. It has to be that simple in design that if it popped up on TV, because it was all about, like, back in the day, you caught something on TV, right? It's like you're channel flipping, and you would stop if you saw something cool. So they're like, it has to be that simple and recognizable that from looking across the room, you'd recognize, that is Deep Space Nine. So I remember that. And so I kind of went by the same idea, like, this ship has to be so, like, simple. And I think Joss responded really well to that. And I think he appreciated this idea of like, let's have a lot of really rough images and a few really nice painted images, especially in high budget shows, you tend to get this really beautiful, beautiful painted artwork. And then you feel bad, you kind of feel guilty when you have to tell the artist like, well, that's actually not at all what we wanted, but it's beautiful. But then it's like, what did that get us, guys? We got a beautiful image, but it's not what we wanted. So I really believe in like a lot of simple pencil sketches. So we had pages and pages printed out, and we would just lay them all out on this long table. And I would give Joss a Sharpie, and I'd have a Sharpie, and it'd just be like, these are disposable printouts, just go to town. We just X and circle and check mark things we like, things we didn't like about different designs. And what we landed on for the ship, I think there's one image that was very much almost like a bow. It kind of resembled a bow, like a bow and arrow bow. And I'm like, all right, that's kind of cool. And Joss has really good instincts of just knowing what will, I think, catch people's eyes. And by that same token, simple shape, but recognizable and memorable. We developed that one drawing, and the very last thing to get added to it, and the theme, the brief, if you want to know, was always at this point in the story, we don't want to know, is it explicitly a spaceship? Is it a creature? Is it both? Is it a spaceship that is so advanced that it's effectively grown? Maybe that's how vehicles are actually made in a super intelligent, technologically forward place, that we would like somehow be able to grow our spaceships. And we want to make sure it wasn't too creature-like. So we put all these little holes as if they were like windows and little points of light. And I think we struck that balance pretty well. And the last thing to be added was this kind of great, almost peacock-like tail feathers to the ship, which was very, very late in the design process. Like way after we finished the ship, we went back and said we needed like a really elegant way to show the spores coming out. So we thought, all right, let's make the sweeping tail, these tail feathers, and the spores would continue on from the shape of those feathers. One, to make it readable, legible, something you could spot even if it's really small on screen. And from reading some of the comments online, it seems to be a lot of people picked up on that kind of those tail feather features, almost angel wings. I think some people are interpreting it as like the wings of an angel, which we never, ever thought. I never saw it that way, but now I can't see anything but angel wings. But anyway, yeah, so that's a ship.
Yeah, no, I actually definitely saw it that way. When I first saw it, it felt like something almost godlike and divine and unknowable in that kind of way, that the mystery. And in the sense that you were saying you want this iconic shape to be something that people, like, it catches their eye. And obviously, like, all the characters on the ground, it caught their eyes. Like, they're all staring up into the sky. And that feels like a subconscious indication for me and for the audience that we should be focusing on this thing in the sky. We don't know what it is. And I wanted to ask you, like, maybe this is my pet theory, but I think in episode 6, Sarah describes the ship as a dragonfly. And I was wondering, because when I think of the Galanthi and the orb, and I'll just preface this by saying you can totally dance around this question. You don't have to give out any spoilers or anything. But the orb feels to me a bit like a cocoon kind of thing, which takes me to the butterfly aspect, where it, like a butterfly, starts off as a caterpillar, and then it cocoons itself and emerges into this beautiful thing that flies. And maybe the Galanthi and the scientist recording is the caterpillar stage, or again, like, you don't have to spoil or anything, but I wonder, did you have an influence in that kind of way?
I think the pod or the chrysalis, whatever you want to call it, the thing in the cave, always meant to let you know it's some kind of, egg or chrysalis. And there's a line by Hay, less egg, more chrysalis-like. So, that was always meant to like be very, very clear. The dragonfly thing, funny enough, that was episode 6. And, by that point, the production schedule, especially with the COVID hiatus, was we had most of episode 1 already done. And so by time 6 was being written, it was pretty clear what the visual of the ship was. So I'm not 100% sure, but I would assume that at that point, it actually does look like a dragonfly. We probably didn't think of that while designing it, but by time 6 was written, there was visual now material to go off of. Also, the way the spores came out of the ship, Melody says it was a dragonfly and it emitted sparks or fire like sparks. And again, I think that we probably benefited by having the visuals done for the pilot by that point. So 6 could be written with very specific visuals like that. It was never like it was a dragonfly and we knew about that, so we had to design it like a dragonfly. That line was probably being born out of what our ultimate design was. If you ask me, maybe all along it's supposed to be dragonfly, but in terms of the whole caterpillar and all that, not. I mean, it's always, again, it's an egg, it's a chrysalis. There's always that. There's always implied, right, that it's some kind of evolving thing. So
right. Mm-hmm. Just in general, what are some other shots in the show that our listeners would be surprised to learn were digitally inserted via CGI? Are there any surprises?
A lot. A lot of really silly things like adding more people into the department store and adding more people onto the street because we felt London didn't feel crowded enough. We had a lot of real locations of London, real London squares where we just sort of like CG replaced one whole half of it to like make it feel more expansive and open. I think the town square in 105 is probably the best example because of COVID. We were so limited to what we could shoot in the hanging scene. We had moments of we didn't even have enough because of COVID. We didn't have enough background to have the soldier, like the 2 gunmen at the same time as like the other 2 guards, because they were going to be played by the same people. So in shots where you're looking up at the shooters, if you look closely, like some shots they're there and sometimes they're not. And actually we didn't end up replacing because I think we rationalized enough that, they could have moved to the other side but those were the constraints. Like all those camera angles are trying to hide so much of what we couldn't show because we didn't have either enough people or the set. We did a CG extension. The whole like second level of that whole set is all CG. Looking up. What else? When Amalia comes out of what's the place called? She comes out of Grand Abbey at the end of 106 after the birds attack. That's completely CG because we had no. We just thought it was pretty ambitious, but we ended up having just this camera angle that just looked at nothing but blue screen, which is okay because we can do that. But definitely some of the more ambitious CG of whenever you start replacing most of the screen, you really start to get into like, ooh, this is, let's not be too ahead of ourselves. Yeah, sorry, I can't think of any.
Oh no, that was more than enough. You gave us gold. I wanted to say, speaking of that bird attack scene, I don't know, just in terms of the growth potential of that character, Augustus Bidlow. I don't know if you've seen Hitchcock's The Birds, but
Sure.
I feel like, and again, this is just me kind of extrapolating from what we've already seen. I'm incredibly excited to see his powers and how they manifest in the world, and to see how he uses birds as, I guess, a weapon, or maybe not just a weapon, a surveillance device. I don't know, but I feel like it could have a really atmospheric kind of horror quality to it, if given the story circumstances. I don't know. So I'm trying to just smuggle that in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's such a great character. I mean, his performance is just golden in every scene. So, I think at the end of the day, again, we try to rely not so much on, I think one of the strengths of the show is like, we try not to get too gimmicky, and too sci-fi, and we really do bring it back to the character. We have plenty of creative meetings where we say, oh, then like a camera can like swoop through London, and we pull back and then we remind ourselves, not our show. That's a cool idea, just not our show. We try to, anyway, so going back to Augie is, I think, it'll always be more about him and his performance, and we'll have a few bird things, no doubt. I don't know. I just say it all has to relate back to his character. So that's what I'll say.
So the cinematographer on the series is Seamus McGarvey. I was wondering, because the cinematographer really establishes a look of the show. Are they keeping in touch with the post-production part of it?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is in general, Seamus, who is, by the way, just the most fantastic DOP to work with, just is such a nice guy and super duper creative and just super fun about it. He was with us for the first few episodes. And then we do have different DOPs rolling through the show. The same way you have different directors rolling through the show. And yes, Seamus was always given the kind of responsibility of setting the tone for the show, which I think he did in a fantastic way. And even when we're shooting, me and him on set, the DOP and the director are often kind of huddled together, having to basically trade notes and say, well, what if I wanted to get a shot of this? So then I would say, well, that, you would have to put some blue screen there, or maybe if the actor reacted in such a way, we could then add something that they're reacting to, it's this nice little dialogue between what the director wants, how are we going to shoot it, and then how does visual effects help or not help? And so with Seamus, a lot of times it would be discussing like, if I wanted to shoot Primrose this way, if the camera were dollying, and moving with, there's a lovely shot when Amalia and Penance first are in their new opera outfits as they start to head out to the opera. They say their lines of, you look lovely, I think so too. And there's a great shot where all the orphans are there and the camera is dollying, and you see Primrose standing there, and Primrose kind of shuffles out of the way to let Amalia and Penance pass. Beautiful shot. crazy to do because like dollying cameras, all the characters, Primrose is in front of a window, which means if she's in front of a window, we can't put a green screen there because it's blocking the light. That's pretty much lighting the whole room. So those are those discussions where it's like, I'm like, okay, can we put a green screen? And it's like, oh, but that's where the light is coming from. Oh, if we move the camera here. So it's a nice dialogue. And Seamus is just one of these great guys that is so willing to like work with you. And he kind of trusts that you're doing what's ultimately, best for the show. It's not just out of my butt that I'm coming up with stuff. So what you see in the show is usually kind of the end result of the three of us coming up with our final solution. And if you look at that shot in particular, the solution was we didn't put any green screen to block the light. And the camera dolly move is it's getting a little technical, but it's only on one axis, meaning that it's not dollying and jibbing, which means up and down. Dollying is left and right, jibbing is up and down. It's not doing both. It's only dollying, which means that when we composite Primrose in, we only have to worry about like one axis of match moving. If you're trying to match move two different axes, you are dealing with, it becomes nearly impossible to recreate the same camera move because we have to shoot Primrose separately on a separate take. And to get that move to match in both the dolly and the jib is extraordinarily difficult. So that's one of the like, I can give you the move, but only the dolly or the jib. And then to answer your question about how involved does he get into post, Seamus or any DOP will always do a pass of the grade, the color grade, which ultimately seals the final. It's like the final varnish on a show, right? It's a final fine tuning of all the color. Sometimes it's with the visual effects. Often visual effects haven't been finished yet, but when in a perfect world, the DOP definitely has their final, little kiss on the episode.
Cool. I hear that the video wall is really popular these days. Can you explain to the listeners what a video wall is and how you use that?
The video wall, does that mean like virtual production, like an LED stage?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. On our show, we don't use any video walls. What you're referring to is on shows like The Mandalorian, and Star Wars, a few Star Wars movies. They basically have a giant LED curved 180 degree wall that's like 12 feet, 15, 20 feet tall, maybe. And that's the idea that instead of building sets and instead of green screen, you actually do all the visual effects work up front and design the environments and model texture and light your worlds. But you do it through like an Unreal Engine, and you actually put up the 3D set on that video wall and have the characters, the actors perform in front of it. It's all the rage right now, and everyone talks about it. It is a very, very future forward approach to filmmaking. And I don't doubt that a lot of shows, visual effects shows, will get into it. If you ask me, who has quite a bit of knowledge and experience in real-time stuff and how LEDs work, it's a great tool, and it's just got to be used for the right things and for the right budget. People seem to think that, this will be cheaper because we don't have to build anything, or that we don't have to pay for all these visual effects later. Cost wise, well, I don't know too much about the cost, but it's still visual effects. You're just sort of doing it up front. And that is not necessarily that much more fun. In fact, it probably puts a lot of pressure to get stuff done. I think what people forget is visual effects is not just putting something into that green screen. Visual effects is, in the post process, this very, very, very iterative process with not just the directors, but producers and editors, and where we fine tune stuff to death, right? We say, move that cloud a little bit over, or make that building just a little bit taller, or that flower a little redder. And by doing things in post, we have that flexibility. Is that flexibility always good? No, because it gives you just go out of control sometimes. But if you choose to do virtual production, it's usually with the intention of saying, well, we're done, right? We filmed it. We don't have to do it. But, in the post process, people are going to want things changed, right? And they're still going to want that building a little taller, or that cloud a little bit moved over, in which case it becomes even more costly because you don't have green screen to easily cut out the characters, right? Now that's changing. There are some really, really next generation technologies coming out where we'll be able to pull green screen and put these virtual backgrounds at the same time through some really, really crazy methods where we can like flicker between the green screen faster than the eye can see, but the camera can see it. So you'll get both your green screen. Like if you switch every other frame from green screen to your virtual background, the human eye may not even pick it up, but the cameras will be able to see both frames, and you'll have both your green screen. I mean, I'm speaking now a little theoretical, but virtual production, great tool. Just use it for the right thing.
That's fascinating that you say it's future forward, in the sense that if they can make it a more agile process, then it'll be really the perfect combination of being iterative and also being something that informs performances on the set.
Oh yeah. It's coming for sure.
Okay.
It just may not be for everyone right now.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that for a visual effects supervisor in film and television, it's easy to make the transition into video games and vice versa? And have you worked in video games?
I have never worked in video games. I've been asked that a lot. I grew up playing video games constantly. Although there's a different era of games, but so funny enough, I would say, and to go back to your question about how did I get into, visual effects, what I probably forgot to mention was the thousands of hours of playing video games, right? Because it just taught you about graphics and taught you about basic programming and just how colors and graphics and pixels and sprites and physics, game physics. But I haven't worked in games. And is it easy to go between the two? I would say it depends who you are. I think for visual effects artists, especially ones that are specialized in like assets, which are like building the models and texturing and shading and animators and riggers and rigging. Now we actually put like bones and muscles under the skin, so we're actually simulating how game that we do that in movies right now in visual effects. No doubt that's coming to games very soon. So a lot of what games is what visual effects could do 10 years ago, but now you can do it in real time. So everything we're doing in visual effects now that takes us hours to compute, or you got to wait till the next morning to see if something rendered, it's going to come into games probably now just 5 years from now. So in that sense, it is easy to hop across because a lot of the technology is the same. Again, from that artist perspective and maybe technical and programming, from a visual effects supervisor perspective, maybe not as transferable, because the core of my job still lies in like the creative storytelling. So maybe for like game cinematics, yes, it's totally applicable because it's basically like a short film. But for like real-time gameplay, I'd probably be less useful. Like if I were to like go to a game company now, I'm not really sure what I could offer. I'd be like, I could probably tell you how to make images look cool, but or how to tell a story and emotionally convey something, but I probably wouldn't be able to tell you what makes a good game.
I don't know if you've ever played like the Naughty Dog games, like Uncharted or The Last of Us, but those are such cinematic games that really blurring the boundary between what's film and what's games, and it's also a very linear story focused type thing.
Yeah, I mean, such pioneering. And I love games like that because boy, does it shake up the industry. That's when everyone starts asking, whoa, can game people become filmmakers, and can filmmakers become games? Yeah, I think it's great. I personally probably just am not probably equipped, but I think there probably a lot younger VFX supervisors who probably are a lot more in tune with that kind of understanding both realms, because everyone watches movies, right? What person who plays games doesn't watch movies, right? But not everyone who watches movies plays games. And I probably fall a little bit into that camp, at least modern games. Like I played Super Nintendo most of my childhood. That dates me, right? So yeah, I'd say it's probably the other way. I think games people probably easily come into cinema. I don't know if cinema guys can go into games, but I don't know. I don't know. I haven't thought about that one. So
speaking of that up and coming generation that's kind of in both of these worlds, what advice would you give to young VFX artists who are kind of coming up in the game?
Young VFX artists in visual effects, I would say it's a booming, and I don't want to use expletives, but holy cow, is the industry booming right now. Not just the film industry or television industry, but VFX. There are so many shows in production, so many studios, competing right now. And I think that cinema world is gradually more and more realizing how integral visual effects are, even to the rom-com. It's involved in everything. And, I don't think people realize, but even on like comedy sitcoms, maybe not sitcoms like the ones in front of audiences, but shows that are like the Goldbergs or something, right? I have a friend who's a supervisor in that. And I remember having lunch with him and be like, oh, well, what work is on the Goldbergs? And he was just like, are you kidding me? There's so much stuff. Basically, I shouldn't use that show, but in general, a lot of shows, especially for comedy, will, take two different takes of different actors, and splice them together, even if the camera's moving, and they'll get their timings just right so that the joke just lands a little bit sharper, or manipulate, even like slowing down footage so that there's even more of a delay, or someone's thinking a little longer before the other person reacts. I mean, we all know so much about comedy's timing, and that has now entered visual effects, where we do massive amounts of timing tweaks, which is still pretty difficult to do because cameras are moving. You got to make it all match up. So what's my point? My point is visual effects is so in demand in every department, whether and not just creative, if you love visual effects and you love sci-fi, but you're not really an artist, but you're organized, the visual effects producers and production managers and coordinators and the organizing people, right? That the less creative people, the more schedule time and money, and those jobs are just as much in demand. PAs, we can't even find like enough entry-level guys to run around on set. Like it's incredible how visual effects editors, it's a very unique position where you've got to be both like a super avid the software editing person, but you've also got to know like After Effects and how visual effects works. Coveted position right now because we can't find enough people there. It's so in demand right now. So good time to be in the business. Don't waste time. Just watch a lot of cool movies, be inspired, and don't wait for someone to give you a job. Go out with your iPhone and shoot some videos, add some visual effects to it, make a demo reel, and get hired to work like on a Marvel film. Like it's crazy right now how many people we need in the business.
Yeah, and just going full circle, like you said in the beginning, just getting ourselves out there, getting our stuff out there. Yeah.
Luck does not, you got to make your own luck, right? Is that a lame quote from Titanic? But, this is cheesy too, but you have to roll the dice to win something, right? You gotta be out there. You gotta expose yourself to the possibility of luck happening. If you sit at home and stay in, you're never going to the world and life is all about chaos, and chaos creates random occurrences and random encounters. And you gotta put yourself into the position for chaos to happen.
Well, I don't know what's a better piece of advice to end this thing on. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, it's inspiring and impressive for me anytime I get the opportunity to speak with someone who's operated at such a high level in such a competitive, crazy industry. So thank you for joining us, and I can't wait to see what happens in the second half of the season.
Oh, it will be very exciting. We've got... one, we appreciate so much how much people love the show, and oh my gosh, the stuff people have picked up on. And we're trying to honor all those things and just build upon, and well aware of what, not just the expectations, but well aware, I think, of the love and how much we want to, honor that and get more of it. So we're excited, and we're just getting started.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Do you want to plug anything else or say anything at your social media or anything like that so people can see cool stuff?
It's been interesting. I've never been a social media guy, but after this year with all the Nevers stuff, it's been kind of interesting. So if you want to have any more questions about visual effects or, career advice or anything, or just having questions, I'm at the Johnny Han, JOHNNYHAN, and you'll find me there.
Thank you so much. This has been The Conversation with Johnny Han. Thank you for tuning into the Nevers podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you.
Have a good one.
This episode of the Nevers Podcast was written, researched, produced, and edited by Matthew at Culture Inject Studios.